Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 2 premiere of The Boys. It seems like they're releasing these episodes in chunks on Friday, so the first 3 episodes are out now. But I'm just going to break them down one by one. We're going to see if it ends up still being like maybe 3 more next week and then another after. We'll see kind of everything shakes out because I haven't really looked into it too much at the time of recording this. Nevertheless, jumping into this premiere, a great premiere, a lot of interesting things. I think it's interesting. They don't really give you a time frame of how long it's been since season 1, but enough time that obviously some things have changed. Obviously, like they're having a funeral for Translucent. They're making it seem like obviously it's so interesting because they want to make it so that Billy's the one that's responsible for killing Madeline. It's even kind of weird they even doing these weird reenactments, which is so weird because it's literally the same circumstances. I mean, I guess it's like you get enough police information, you can kind of construct the rest of the narrative on your own, but it's weird. But nevertheless, I thought it was interesting. So I'm like, why not make Translucent's death be by Billy? It's like, no, you need to make it by a super terrorist because the last thing you want is other douchebags around the world being like, oh, superheroes are killable? We just got to find a way that any Joe Schmo can do it. Because if you can find out like some regular dude like Billy was able to do it, even though obviously it wasn't technically Billy. I mean, it was a collaborative effort killing Translucent. The fact of the matter is, you don't want that information getting out there. Like that was kind of the whole point they brought up season 1. So I was like, okay, so that makes sense in the grand scheme of things. But obviously, I think it's kind of douchey just because like the fact of the matter is, you have Homelander up there talking to Maverick. It's like, oh, I'm here to, Translucent. Almost if he knew. It's like, you gotta tell those super terrorists. I mean, that's not really what, but it's like, he told me, Homelander, make sure you get him. It's like, really kind of, chomping at the scene. And then the fact is, having Starlight, having Annie, like, sing the song and everything, and she's kind of parading around. Obviously, she's in, like, her quote-unquote uniform. She can't even use her own. I think that speaks volumes. I think she's not in a position where it's like she can really like deny them. So Homelander's probably like, nah, this is how things go. It's probably like Vaught in general is probably like, this is how things go. No more like you doing whatever you want to, because like obviously Homelander probably reined them all in, or maybe just Vaught in general reined them in. Who knows? Obviously there's a lot of context we're missing on that front. I didn't even think about this when we saw her in the trailer because I forgot about it until I rewatched season 1. It's like, right, Ashley got fired, but now she's back because apparently Homelander's the one that pined for her to basically have Madeline's position. And I thought it was interesting, like, in the grand scheme of things, now that baby milk situation that you see in the trailer of Homelander drinking that milk, like sticking his tongue in it, it's like, it makes sense now. It's like, oh, because you regardless of, you were caught up in the moment. I mean, that's the whole point. Homelander is he's a petulant child. And then the fact of the matter is he just kind of goes on his whims. He doesn't really think things through. So obviously it's like he was pissed off, so he killed Madeline, but there's still a piece and part of him that misses her. So he's drinking her breast milk, being like, it's like she's still there. Ashley walks in on him. I don't know how much of what she saw, but she knew not to say anything because it's like, oh, thank you, Homelander. And it's like she actually suggested a new hero, Blind Spot, to join the 7. Obviously, Homelander didn't enjoy that one bit, because at least it seems like around Vaught, it seems like he tries to keep up appearances to be a somewhat semblance of a hero, but he just kind of said, hell that, because I guess he's no longer technically being reined in by Madeline. She was kind of what kind of kept this mad dog chained up. And so he just like slaps the dude's head, I guess, busting his eardrums, like shit ton of blood coming out. Ashley's like freaking out, being like, what? And he's like, no, you don't get to decide who's in the 7. It's me. You are going to keep an eye out. Like, you are only in this position because I basically put for you to have this position. So don't think that you really got this job. I'm the one that dictates things around here. So whatever information you can find, you report it to me. You understand? And it's like, oh, you kind of feel bad for her. Because obviously later on they're doing some focus testing, and it's like, oh, what terms do you prefer? Do you prefer super terrorists? And it's like, oh, that is menacing, makes you want to lock the doors. He's like, I think supervillain sounds better. And then they poll supervillain. It's like, all right, you want to save America or save the world? It's like, oh, people are polling for save the world because it's like, oh, it's not just about one country, it's about everyone. But he's like, no, we're going to go with Save America, because obviously it's about kind of, once again, kind of that fear mongering, because it's like, because Americans are going to, he's like, you're going to basically want them to only think this is about them. They're not going to give a damn about the world. All they're going to worry about is the country that they live in. It's kind of the point he's trying to get across. So obviously showing, Ashley kind of being like, it's like, I think he's like, no, we're going with Save America. And she's like, yeah. He's like, get it done, So it's just kind of like, once again, Madeline had made it clear at the end of season 1, oh, I'm terrified, I'm scared of you. And we see Ashley kind of, it's like, oh, right from the bat, it's like, nope, you have every right to be scared of him. Like, once again, he's kind of not holding any punches anymore. So there's that situation. Obviously, we got the boy situation, because we have, like, Huey secretly meeting with Annie, who's, trying to keep it low cover as well. They're meeting on a train. Obviously, it's like, oh, did you snap your Etsy car? She's like, yeah, I did it. Like, I did it. He would, like, I get the burner situation. It's like, but for him, it's like, I'm just scared, Obviously, he's scared because it's like, you're the most famous person, and I'm on the wanted list. The fact of the matter is, things could be bad for both of us. And obviously, it seems like, at first I was wondering what the relationship was kind of now after everything, but it seemed like, things seemed like they were better at the very least, because it seemed like she, especially because her leg was kind of leaning against his, and I think he had noticed it, and he was thinking like, probably thinking like, maybe we're in a better place. But obviously it's like, it's like they're kind of joking and stuff. But then, like, the whole thing circles back around about, like, him lying to her for so long and everything, and that just kind of makes things, tense and awkward between them. But obviously she's like, go home and get some sleep, and he's like, I'm not going to sleep until I know you're safe, because obviously she's in that building and anything could go wrong, considering the murderers that are there, in particular Homelander. It's like, knowing what they're capable of, and it's like, if you know the truth, they'll kill you. So it's like, obviously he's worried about her. And speaking of the Seven, we got the intro with with Black Noir, one of the few instances of us seeing him in action. Merciless, just killing left and right. But what was interesting, though, is, like, we still don't, other than his skills, we don't know what Black Noir's whole thing is. Like, obviously that, that dude's name, the super terrorist, his name is, like, Nabib. The fact of the matter is, he blew up, well, because his name translates to captain. But basically, he blew up. It hurt Noir, but it didn't kill him. It, like, burned his flesh, like, partly through his armor and stuff like that. And he sliced off home dude's head, and I'm assuming that was his son or his buddy's son that was there, and he's walking towards him with the dude's head, the captain's head in his hand, and he's playing with the little kid's doll animal, bunny, and he's just kind of like, which it looks even more psychopathic, him doing that. Like, you're literally carrying a severed head in your other hand. So I was legitimately scared. I was like, are you going to kill this kid? But it didn't seem like he did, so he bounced afterwards. It's almost like, hey, I'm playing with you, kid. Go back to bed, you little bastard. Almost type of situation, which, once again, is like even more scary and depressing. What I also thought was kind of interesting, too, is obviously the conversations between the government and Vaught about how things are going to run. It's like, oh, yeah, the superheroes aren't going to report to you. It's like, literally every other branch of the military reports to a higher-up chain. Who are your heroes going to report to? It's like, oh, who they've always reported to. Edgar's like, me. Then it's also the thing of, like, well, we also have to include collateral damage. It's like, officially 0, but basically, in between the lines, 34%. I'm like, 34% collateral, that's over a third. Okay, and and even Jim Beaver's character being like, almost like, what? And it's just kind of like you have no choice but to sign that, considering all the super terrorists that are out there and everything. So I also thought was really interesting the whole conversation, like Huey trying to, because obviously they're wanted and everything, but Huey wants to try to do the right thing. It's like, we need to find a way to stop Vaught, and it's like, Mother's Milk is like, no. Like, MM's like, dude, I just want to do what I can to try and get back to my family if I can. The fact of the matter is, he was getting pissed at Huey because it's like, there's nothing more to this. We tried our best and basically it failed. It blew up on our faces. Like, there's no, but Huey's the only one that's adamant about, we have to do something about it because we're the only ones who can and will. No one else knows the truth. We have to be the ones that end up doing something, in the grand scheme of things. I think that's kind of, fascinating. And it led to that interesting conversation later on because obviously it's like he suggests bringing Annie in, which they're like, they've got her phone bugged and everything. He's like, yeah, but we use burners. It's like, you're an idiot, Huey. The fact of the matter is she still could have been followed. You could have been followed. We could have all been burned. The fact of the matter is, for Huey... And I thought it was kind of a powerful line from him being like, this is all he has. He doesn't have Robin. He doesn't have his dad. He doesn't even have Annie, anymore in his life. So it's like, all he has left is this mission. Because I think for him, it's like, all this kind of started because of a path down revenge. And like, things have escalated to this point. Well, things have gotten to this point without him. Maybe not. I'm sure that's also playing a role in all of his guilt. Because obviously I'm sure he's feeling bad about lying to Annie, but also by telling her the truth, he's basically turned her life upside down. And even to the point that it's like, like she's going to be in danger. This isn't just about you. Like, if Homelander or any of them find out about what she's done, she's fucked. So it's like, the more you get her deeper into this, the closer you get her to the meat grinder, basically. It's like, and Huey never, thought about it. It's like, superpowered or not, Homelander will kill her. We know that. Whether they kind of probably have an idea, but they know not to mess with Vaught. Like, Vaught's willing to do all that they do. So it's like, because like, obviously, like the people they're with, obviously these are like associates of Frenchie, because he's like, they're not friends. But the fact of the matter is, they do criminal stuff. He thought they were smuggling in like drugs and all that, but it turns out they were also smuggling in people. They were also paid to smuggle in a soup terrorist who ended up killing one of the people. And so, I'm assuming that's the guy that who showed up and his arms was super messed up and his rib was. I'm assuming it was that guy that got hit with the boat and everything. Because the moment that happened, I was immediately like, was Vaught the one that did that? I don't know. Because part of me wonders, because there's a subplot in this episode which makes me go like, what the hell is that? It's a whole deep situation. Because obviously he's hit rock bottom. He meets up with Eagle the Archer, which is basically, I can only assume, this world's Hawkeye or Green Arrow. But the fact of the matter is... he, I was like, oh, he bailed the Deep out because the Deep has just kind of been doing a lot of stuff publicly, getting arrested. He just hit rock bottom, essentially. And it's like, oh, here's Carol. Carol wants to help you. She's like, oh, I'm going to help you get back into 7. And then she hands him this book about, like, oh, the collective or something like that. My mind immediately was like, is this a cult? And then I was like, do you think this group has something to do with... Because I'm wondering, was it Vaught that did that? Like... paid for that soup terrace because obviously I'm just basing this on a trailer. Obviously I haven't seen episodes 2 and 3 yet, but the fact of the matter is, like, I'm wondering, does this all tie into Stormfront's storyline? Is she connected to this group? Like I said, is this just some helpful group that's like, oh, like this lady that's like, oh, I helped Eagle, I'm gonna help you too, Deep? Is that the case? But it came off a little culty, like, oh, join our little collective. It just seemed a little weird, and I'm like, what is that going to turn into? Why are you so adamant about helping him? I mean, because she's like, oh, she feels like therapy's destructive, that this is going to be something else. And I'm like, huh. That's interesting. And also, like, kind of like the jab they took at, like, Arrow users, because it's like, he was like, oh yeah, like, I saved the day, there were hostages, but my aim was perfect. Until, a quiver can only hold so many arrows. Like, because a lot of stuff kind of goes around. I mean, they acknowledge it from time to time, like, oh, I'm out of arrows. Like, whether it be a Hawkeye or whether it be a Green Arrow. But it's still just kind of a thing of like, oh, it seems almost sometimes you have like a ridiculous amount of arrows. And it's just like, yeah, an antiquated weapon like arrows. What he said, like, arrows versus like tech 9s or something like that, I think this is also kind of an interesting point, is the fact is that Frenchie doesn't understand Kimiko as well as he thinks he does, because she showed him like an origami thing and he was like, oh, you made that? She's like, no, and she wrote the boy, and it's like, he was like, the boy, he's like, I don't get it, and it's like, I think she's suggesting that there was a little boy on that cargo ship, or, something like that. It belonged, maybe, because I don't know why she was able to kind of piece that together. Like, I'm assuming that's what that meant like she knew that that belonged to a boy that was on that ship, that maybe there was someone else on that boat that got off and she noticed it that no one else did. That's what I was kind of, but I think it's interesting. I think it's also because Frenchie was also frustrated because like, oh, his buddies, and he's like, once again, it's like, they're not my friends. I thought they were, sneaking in drugs and stuff like that. I didn't know they were doing this to people, and now they also let a super terrorist, into the States and everything like that. So then we have our scene from the trailers, our introduction to Stormfront, which is so great. And obviously, with the context of the episode now, that it makes that situation even more tense when you have Homelander looking at Ashley. She's like, I didn't know this. I swear I didn't. It's like, but aren't you supposed to know this type of stuff? So you saying you don't know probably makes it worse too. And it's like, she's terrified. And it's like, with the context of what we know now, because obviously you can even tell in a trailer, Homelander's like, oh, aren't you fun? Like, it's like, oh, that rage that's hidden underneath that smile, like, oh, the evil that's there. But it turns out, obviously, Mr. Edgar's the one that hired her. And then you had, like, Homelander stepping to Edgar being like, oh, the fact of the matter is even Madeline wouldn't do this crap. And it's like, you kind of forget that I'm Vaught isn't Vaught without me. I am Vaught. I'm the one that kind of signed off on everyone else joining the Seven. So it's like, you don't make any decisions like that unilaterally. You involve me. And so basically like, oh, my contract's up in about a year, so how about I bounce? And then you got, Mr. Edgar, played by, obviously, Mr. Esposito, doing his thing. It's just like everyone makes that thing about like, man, he always plays villains because he's so menacing. Just that look. It's like you're standing in front of Homelander. You think Billy was kind of ballless and like, had balls to be in front of you and not scared. Seemed like Edgar was purely fine and he was just kind of like, just that face and the silence, it just adds to it. I'm like, oh, you're so menacing, dude. But the fact of the matter is, he's like, do you know about our founder, Frederick Vaught? And I thought this is interesting. So I'm like, oh, so we're getting into the backstory of Vaught. This dates back to World War II because apparently he worked with Hitler to basically, because obviously we know he was a leading edge on he had been working on Compound V even back then. Like there was some version of Compound V that existed even back then. And obviously, eventually he left Hitler's side and eventually joined the Allies. And it's like the government kind of parlayed a lot of stuff, not parlayed, but pardon is the word I was looking for, a lot of stuff that he did. And so now, it's like, and I like Edgar making it clear, it's like, you are under the misconception that Vaught is in the hero business. No. We're in the pharmaceutical business. You don't mean shit. What matters is Compound V, the same formula that you put at risk. You put this company at risk, you acting like the child, doing whatever you want to just to get you guys that military contract. Now there's super terrorists out there with our compound. So it's only going to be a matter of time before the press finds out about it and eventually the public. So we have to be here cleaning up your mess. And that's so interesting, despite everything, despite him feeling himself, feeling all good and powerful, he shuts up. It's like a child being disciplined by their father. It's like, oh, I'm not Madeline. I'm not going to stroke your ego. Madeline was scared of you, so she stroked your ego to keep you in line because she knows that you're a temperamental child. Edgar sees you as a temperamental child and basically pulled out the belt and was like, get in line, get your mess together, kid. And was like, yo. And that's what I'm saying, like, you're this powerful being. You have all these powers, you were this world Superman, and you couldn't, you were just pissed. You couldn't do anything about it. I thought that was so interesting. Like I said, after Madeline, I thought you'd be just kind of quick to, but it's like, no, it seems like Edgar still kind of has you on a leash. That's what I just thought was kind of interesting. And so, obviously, he goes to visit his child, but Becca's like, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm here to see my son. So, obviously, a lot of context is missing from that of being like, what happened at the after season 1's finale? Like, it's like, how did Homelander just let Billy go? I guess it's a thing of maybe Becca was like, please, I'll let you be in your son's life if you just let Billy live. Or maybe he thought, oh, it's more delicious to let you live. I can kill you at any point in time, so go ahead, run, knowing that Becca's alive and she had my child and everything, so there's that side of things. them meeting up with Rayner, obviously they're trying to like, she ended up figuring something out, and it's like, what did she figure out? And then it's like her nose started bleeding. I'm like, what's that about? Her head popped. I was like, oh, I did not see that coming. I was like, no, which is interesting. I think that's also the beauty of this show, and I think it probably it might be something directly from the comic book itself. The fact of the matter is, oh, no character safe. Like, you thought, like, oh, this is a recurring character we saw in season 1. Oh, you thought she'd be back in 5. I was like, oh, no, the deputy director of the CIA just got killed. And obviously, it's a powered person that, like, Frenchie isn't aware of. So it's like, maybe someone more new, maybe it's a soup terrorist, which brings into question, was Vaught behind this? Was it someone else? You would assume so, but maybe Vaught's just a part of something much bigger. I mean, it definitely seems like it's part of something much bigger. Because, like, makes it clear, like, if this was about us, our heads would be exploded. But they killed Rayner because they had been watching her the entire time. The fact of the matter is, the moment she said something she didn't have no business saying, boom, they killed her. So now it's a thing of like, well, what do we do now? And then at the end of it all, Billy shows up. And obviously Huey's the one that was most against it. Because I think for multiple reasons. For one, it's like, why would you want to turn to him? Because he abandoned you. He was going to leave you guys to rot. He was so focused on his revenge on Homelander, he left you to rot. But I think also Huey's pissed because it's just like, you drew me into all of this. You made me, like, basically the murderer I am, the complicated, messed up thing that has become my life is because of you. Like, you put me down this path, and it's like you were just using me. You never cared about me. You never cared about Robin. This was always about Becca and Homelander for you, getting revenge for Becca, So I think all of that made Huey go like, don't call Billy, because he's like, yeah, I'm sure Billy's still alive. I'm sure he's not dead. He's too stubborn. He's too much of an asshole to die. But the fact is, like, he didn't want to contact him because I was like, we can do this on our own because Billy is so in it for himself. Huey's at least trying to do it for the greater good. But Frenchie called him because he's like, I'm sorry, but you're no leader. You're no captain. And it's got to be frustrating. And obviously, him saying that line of like, daddy's home, and it's just like, you can, like, the complicated feelings you can tell Huey has about it. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing this season, because Huey's season 1 was all about like, all right, I'm reluctant, but I'm going to do what you want me to do, Billy. Now he's just going to probably fight Billy on a lot of stuff, like, no, we shouldn't do that. But obviously everyone else sides with him. But once again, it's like, he was going to leave you to die, Frenchie. You, Kimiko, and and how are you so okay with that, I'd actually let it slip my mind to talk about the whole other angle to this whole situation with Annie, the whole her and Gekko situation, which also, once again, kind of showing you, like, because obviously we know kind of like the more seedy side of like superheroism, just because we saw obviously like that club Ezekiel was a part of and everything, the kind of debauchery you can kind of get up to. That dude Gekko basically letting people cut off his body parts and stuff like that, even being like, for $1,000 I can let you cut off my dick. He's like, and the dude's like, what's the nearest ATM? And so obviously for Annie it sucks because Gekko is someone that she's a friend with. Like, it's like they grew up in the superhero game and everything. And obviously she's blackmailing him to get Compound V. And I think that I think that sets a very interesting element for Annie's story this season too, just because obviously she wants to take down Vaught, because it's like they're full of liars, and also just not just the lies and the deception, is also like the terrible stuff that they're up to. Like, Annie's just tired of so many people lying to her, and especially Huey, because after the whole Rayner thing, he was trying to be like, oh, we should take this slow, because what happened to Rayner, plus hearing what had to say beforehand about dragging Annie too close to this, how much it could backfire on. So he's trying to like no, I think he's going to try and keep her at arm's length about the whole thing. But I think it's already too late. The die has already been cast, and I'm sure there's going to be like ramifications for that later on down the road. So like, it's another thing, once again, because A-Train made that whole point that like, oh, this all started with you, Huey, that maybe again this is all kind of coming back, like him making a choice has, every choice has consequences, and he may not be the one that 100% pays the price. It might be Starlight, So I thought that was just kind of an interesting element. But like I said, also just like Annie having to compromise herself a little bit, just because like blackmailing a friend and stuff like that, because I think it's kind of interesting, because it's almost like the inverse of Huey. Like, Huey had to do all this stuff that Billy was pushing him to do. So it's interesting, like, I think Huey and Annie's relationship this season seemed like it might have been starting off to be a little resemblant of Billy and Huey's relationship. But obviously, unlike unlike Billy, the fact of the matter is Huey's willing to back down and be like, no, I don't want her to get hurt. Whereas, Billy was willing to do whatever he could, whatever he needed to get his revenge, even if it meant compromising other things, So I think that's such an interesting element. I mean, I could easily be reading too much into that, but I think that's kind of a neat comparison just between those two different, relationships, how they're both similar and different at the same time. So I'm curious to see kind of how that element kind of keeps going forward throughout the season as well, But it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.